So it's Sunday, the 20th of October. I'm just going to now go into the last 2 weeks of my respiratory placement in my third year of physiotherapy, and just wanted to reflect a little on Friday and how I feel that went. So the main thing with Friday that I want to look at is about discharge and forward planning. So I left on Friday feeling really quite disheartened and I suppose like I really kind of failed quite significantly, and this was just a kind of a multitude of different things that kind of came together really, and I've subsequently looked back and you know it's fine. There's things I've learned from it, and it's not all doom and gloom as I first thought, but I think on reflection I was just too hard on myself, which I am, and it just pushes me to try and do better. So really the situation what came around from a point of view of the patient that I was dealing with was made medically fit to go home a little unexpectedly. I'd earlier on in the day in prioritising all of my patients, I'd actually checked in the patient's notes. I talked to the nurses, I talked to the staff on the wards, and they were adamant that there was no way that patient was about to be made medically fit. And I went back later on in the afternoon to go and do some rehab work with the patient. I arrived to find the doctor telling the patient that they were then medically fit to go home. So I spoke to my educator, and it was a last minute on a Friday, and it sort of brought about a bit of a Russian situation whereby we had to kind of talk to the patient about what was going to happen and what the options were. The patient was a complex patient, not problem solving the situation at all, and not really seeing the bigger picture about going home. Was absolutely adamant they wouldn't go to one of the pathways that enable is a rehab facility. I think part of the problem with that is its name. I won't say the name on here, but it sounds just like a nursing home or a care home would. So like a lot of patients, as they get older, the last thing they want to do is go to a home. So this is a purpose-built, set-up rehab facility where patients stay after they are medically fit from acute hospitals. And so they were adamant they didn't want to go there. So the whole kind of issue was that prior to this day, there hadn't really been enough planning for discharge. So earlier on in the week, realistically, there could have been more done. Now, I did do some of this in terms of working with other staff, but it didn't quite work out in terms of things didn't quite happen. We'd kind of asked whether or not OT needs to be involved at this stage, and there was a bit of a blurriness about that, and also whether or not the patient could do certain more basic things that they'd need to do to go home, as they were so adamant to do. So my reflection on this and how I want to take this forward, and I think this is a really good thing for anyone watching this, if they are watching this in their any time at university, is when you're starting to work with the patient and rehabilitating a patient in an acute setting after being, whilst they're medically unwell in hospital, is as soon as possible having the forefront of your mind what needs to be done to ensure that patient can go home in the smoothest fashion, or to wherever the discharge is going to be. So having that conversation is really important early on. Having your rehabilitation goals centered around that discharge, and those certainly in the front of your mind, and also thinking of all of the other professionals that need to be involved in that discharge. So if you feel that there's going to be any equipment need, any adjustments, and any other facilitation around going home, OT has got to be one of your first ports of call in thinking about that and how that might happen. Talking to the other physios about saying, I'm starting to work with this patient, they're currently medically unfit, but I foresee that changing in a week or 10 days time. That starting that conversation. And for me, that's something I'm really now going to try and concentrate on doing with all of my patients, especially in the situation where they're coming from ICU, they go onto the ward. At that point, I really need to be thinking about what is their pathway for discharge, what is it they need to achieve with me to enable that discharge, and who else do I need to get involved to make that discharge happen in the most effective and efficient way possible. So when that patient is made medically fit, I'm in a position with that patient and with other professionals who need to be involved to seamlessly make that transition. So I've currently got a patient right now who is, I think, potentially going to be made medically fit quite soon. So priority really is, I'm very aware of their baseline, I'm very aware of where they were before, but I need to start thinking now, what do I need to do very quickly to ensure that they're ready to go home? And if not, and if I think that's not going to happen, have those conversations with the patient about alternative options after hospital, because I can't be thinking they're staying in hospital indefinitely, which is really obvious. And I'm sure some of this, there's probably first years that are thinking, well, this is really obvious, of course I'd be doing all of this. But I'm in my third year, and on Friday I didn't think of any of this. Or I did think of it, but I didn't action it. Lots of other things to think about, and it left a very, not stressful, it was stressful for me, but a rushed and unnecessarily difficult situation. And I'm not taking it all as my fault, because I don't think it should be as a student on placement, but I am taking it as a really good opportunity to reflect on and think about how I can, even as a student, ensure that situation doesn't occur again. And I'm putting this out of video because I think it's a really good thing to be aware of for all students on placement within physiotherapy in a hospital setting, because it's about thinking about that patient, especially these days, that the emphasis on getting them home is big, and rightly so. The hospital's the worst place for a patient that's medically fit. So it needs to be one of the priorities in our minds about what are we doing that's going to enable that smooth transition to discharge, whether that's home, to a rehabilitation facility, to a nursing home, to a residential home. What is it that needs to happen whilst that patient is under your care to have that happen? So yeah, so it's actually, again, like I think I've said before, making mistakes, whether they're true mistakes or just things you see that aren't happening that could have been better, they're a great opportunity to look back on and think, okay, well, what do I do now that means that I can make those situations better, improve on those myself with the team, those sorts of things, and it has done. So if that hadn't happened, I potentially wouldn't have had this reflection and chance to move forward now. So I haven't got long left on this placement. I've got 2 weeks, so fingers crossed I can get some opportunities to put in practice what I've learnt from the situation on Friday. So yeah, so that's that. So that's on focused inpatient rehabilitation based on their discharge plan. Okay, so last couple of weeks, we'll see how we go.